Well, welcome everyone to the Sean Trey Show. This is actually kicking off my season 2. I took a bit of a hiatus, and we are back, and kind of a bit of a new focus because I have been thinking this summer. I took off. First of all, can you introduce who you are? I have a really awesome guest. Can you introduce yourself and tell people who you are and what you do?
I'm Johanna Rothman. I'm delighted to be here. Right? I always love it when people say I took a hiatus to figure out what I really want to do next. So that's where I that's my little playhouse. What do we
Is it?
do next? So I I interrupted myself. Professionally, I'm a writer, speaker, and consultant. Okay. I write and speak all about managing product development, which is management, how you do the product development, how you organize and succeed, all that good stuff. And I consult in various ways with workshops and speaking engagements and private mentorships, all that stuff. But the core of my expertise is managing product development, and I suspect we will talk about that in many personal ways in this
Oh, for
discussion.
sure.
Yeah.
Yes, we will. Well, and what I was diving into, and I love that wheelhouse as well because I love slowing down, taking a hiatus, looking at things, and reassessing things. And so this summer, um, my wife is a singer, famous singer here I live in Vietnam, so my wife is a famous singer, and she was really busy this summer with a big TV show, and I I worked from home, and I was home with my daughter, and so had the little one around, and she's 8 now, and so we were having fun. But I stepped back from the podcast because there was something that came up where she's been asking me all these questions. Daddy, what about this? What about success? What about? And so I've been starting to try to teach her about different things, and and I sit there and look at where I'm at in life, and I'm happy with where I'm at. But am I the pinnacle of success? Probably not. But I'm happy with who I am and what I'm doing, and that's okay. But when she asks about these things, and I say, well, you know what? Let's talk to people. And so I went through and I put down a list of qualities that were interesting to me. And one of the things that is interesting and important that I learned early on, and this was something that when I was younger, I studied martial arts, and I had a absolutely amazing martial arts teacher, Dan Linder. And Dan was able to break things down that were very abstract. How do you progress? What do you need to learn? And he categorized everything. He had these awesome checklists, and there was progress. And we were able to really chart our progress so that you knew where you were at, you knew how to move forward, and you knew how to accomplish something. It wasn't just like, we're going to train and you'll see when we get there. No, it was clarity, and that just had left such an indelible mark on me. And that was something that I was talking to my daughter. So when I started thinking about this, what I did was I was like, I listed a bunch of different types of jobs too that were really interesting, people that had very interesting skills. And one of the things I've always been fascinated is with project management, product management, seeing how people get things done, because it's one thing to say, I want to build a house, I want to create an app, I want to move to a new country, whatever it is. And it's another thing to be able to do it. And I grew up with, I love you, Mom. I'm sure she's going to listen to this episode, and I'll tell her this. um, my mom is a person who always wants to do new things, but she gets bogged down in being indecisive, and then nothing happens. She needs a new car right now. And so she's looking to get rid of her old car. And my brother and I presented her some good options. But I don't know about this, and I don't know about this. And she gets stuck in this circle, and it makes her crazy. And she has tools that she works through to get to the other side of it. But growing up in that environment with two parents that were very indecisive, I was just like, oh, wow. And so these are things that, like, for my daughter, when she asks me these things, I want to learn. But talk to me about, how do you explain, you were talking in the questions I created for you, like agile and lean. What is that? But how do people get things done? Let me start with an even more basic question. How do people get things done?
So I think that if we can take the example of your mom and the car, um,
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, it's really hard to say, they think to themselves, what if this is a really bad decision? How
Yeah.
do I escape a bad decision? So you can plan for failure with risk management, and you can plan for success with risk management. So maybe the key is to present another option. This is why the rule of three is so, so helpful. So if you think I have a choice of buying car A or car B,
Yeah.
right? Those are two options. Only one option is a trap. Two is a dilemma. You get stuck. But three creates breaks the logjam thinking, and three options allows you to think of options 4, 5, and 6. That's a
Mm.
different problem if you have too many options. We can get to that in a minute. But what if the options are rent car A, right? Sign a
Mm-hmm.
short term or a long term lease on car A, and then
Yeah.
a short term or long term lease on car B. Now you have four options, and she can say, oh, if I de risk the potential problems of failure by a short term lease to see if I like this car, right? That's
Yeah.
a little bit more money in for a week or a 2 week rental, but it prevents the long term failure of buying a car that you really hate.
Yeah. Yeah.
and and if you say, I'm really not sure if I really want to buy a car, then you can do a long term lease and know,
Yeah.
and then at the end of 1 or 2 years, you now have an opportunity to make another choice. So that de-risks both failure and success just by adding one more option, right? So
That's,
the rule of three is um, a really valuable uh, way to think about the options that we have. That allows us to take one small step. Right, in the email I sent you, I said I'm a very big fan of taking one small step. This is a really agile and lean approach to things. Getting some feedback on that step, right? What succeeded about that? What did not? And then how do I use what I learned to inform my next plan and my next step?
I
And
love that.
that's how I actually work at almost everything.
Did you remember that movie, What About Bob? Bill Murray back in the day. There was a funny scene, Richard Dreyfuss, I believe, and Bill Murray. And the movie, the one of Bill Murray's greatest movies. But the comedy in there is that the psychologist or psychiatrist was working with his client, and he kept talking about baby steps. Baby steps. You try something, you take a baby step, and you can accomplish anything. There was a great movie, I believe it was called Into the Void. And it's a true story about a guy that was climbing in the mountains. Have you heard about that movie? Um, so he was rock climbing with his friend, and someone lost their footing, and the guy fell. And I believe that the other person was like a person dangling over a cliff, and they had to cut the rope. There was no way. It was either one person or two people were going to fall. And this guy fell into this crevasse, and he was beat up bad, really bad. And he's laying there at the bottom, and he was not dead. He woke up. He was like very broken, lots of problems, but he drifting in and out of consciousness. And he was like focusing on the thing in front of him. He saw like a rock. He crawled toward the rock. When he got to the rock, he found another marker that was a little bit further ahead, crawled toward that marker. And he continued to do this, fading in and out of consciousness. And it was about, I believe, 5 days until he made it to base camp. And they found him, and he was, it was amazing that I believe they had a broken femur or other things that were very severe, but he was able to get there despite of just a ridiculously challenging situation by looking at that next thing he could do. What's the next thing he could do? Because, so often anything that we really want to accomplish, if I looked at my daughter and said, you can own $1 billion company. If she's 8, she's like, she's not even going to want to, probably. And that's okay. I'm not putting that on my kid. But what I am saying is, like, if someone told that to me, I'd be like, how? Really? Like, how? How I have problem putting my shoes on in the morning. It's like,
human. You're a human. Yeah.
Right. The idea of, like, that those baby steps is, you're speaking to the choir.
Well, and I think the story with the climber is so relevant to what we want to discuss today, because he had an overarching goal: stay alive long enough for somebody to really rescue him. But in order to do that, he had to rescue himself, right? So he needed to take those little baby steps in to accomplish that overarching goal. Now, most of us don't have overarching goals that say stay alive long enough for somebody else to rescue us. We much more have goals that say write that next book, do this next podcast, create a really loving environment for my daughter so she can grow up to be successful, right? If you quote took the summer off, which you did not do, you took the summer off from professional obligations, but you did not take the summer off from being a parent. In fact, 8-year-olds are delightful, but they're still
wonderful
8-year-olds.
Yeah. She just absorbing knowledge, absorbing knowledge. And the questions are questions that are, one of the fun things I did is, my wife was like, you need to make sure that she's getting a varied amount of music. So I threw into ChatGPT. I was like, give me 200 of the greatest songs from all the different genres. So today we listened to Fly Me to the Moon from Frank Sinatra. We listened to Summertime from Ella Fitzgerald. We listened to Hey Jude from the Beatles. We listened to Gimme Shelter from the Rolling Stones. We had a good list today. And Billie Jean from Michael Jackson, Like a Prayer from Madonna. We had plenty more. And it was funny because, and then I said, okay, now rate them. What do you think? What do you think about them? And she was brutal. She was like, it was one of them that was like, I think that the Ella Fitzgerald, Summertime, I think she gave it a 5. And I was like, why? And she's like, I just don't like it. And I said, and that is important. That is important. Because that exploration, that understanding, that learning. So 8-year-olds are ridiculously delightful, because a teenager will probably say, well, either they completely hate everything, or they're going to just be like, all right, what I have to say so that we can finish this activity up,
Right. 8-year-olds are so different. Yeah.
Let me ask you this then, because we are talking about goals. How do you define an effective goal? Like in project management, in life, what is a good goal?
So it depends on if it's an intermediate goal or really an overarching goal. So let me take the hard one first, an overarching goal, right? Because that's actually really hard. In organizations for formal projects, I really like overarching goals that talk about the customer and what the customer can do with this thing when we're done delivering it. Right. So if you think about a software product that you like to use, you are the customer. If you had to think of an overarching goal for the next version of this project, of this product, what would it be? Right. You would want it to go faster. You would want it to do all these other things that it doesn't quite do now, you might not even know what you want. But as
Right.
soon as the company told you about it, you would say, yes, I want that thing. That's that's how you define an overarching goal so the customer is happy at the
Mm.
end of it. The customer has more options about what they can do. When we do overarching goals for ourselves, we are the customer.
Yeah.
And that makes it even much more difficult because how many of us put ourselves first? I mean, we are both parents. I am now a grandparent. It's really great, and I spent most of my life right when your kids are small. Your entire world is focused around them. Right.
Yeah.
It's really you focus way down because you're so responsible for them. That's great. But when, as they get older, I'm sorry to tell you this, but as your daughter gets older, she will pull farther and farther away. Fine, that's what they're supposed to do, and
100%.
that makes it much more difficult for us as parents and as adults in society. What are our obligations to ourselves, to our families, to our communities? And
Yeah.
which of those provide us an overarching goal? As we record this, the presidential election in the US is just a little over a month away. Ah,
Right.
right, everybody here is nuts. I suspect everyone around the world is nuts. But
Right.
but one of the things that this election is doing is talking to each of us about what are our personal responsibilities to ourselves, to our
Yeah.
families, to our communities, to the greater society. And the more we think about that, the more we can define our overarching goal. Right? My
Yeah.
husband and I are, since we have no more children living at home, we have all kinds of freedom to create our own overarching goals, which means
Yeah.
for myself, I always say, I'm going to write this nonfiction book this year. I will continue to blog. I'll continue to do my little podcast. I'll continue to write fiction in preparation for when I don't write any more nonfiction books in a year and I write only fiction. At some point, I will make that change. I don't know when. But my overarching goal is to be a better writer, period.
I love that.
A more prolific writer. And that enables me to choose which projects to do and when.
I love that. I had I studied acting when I was younger, and I was living in Los Angeles, and it was just something I loved theater. And I studied with this absolutely amazing teacher named Ivana Chubbuck. And Ivana Chubbuck taught many of the great Hollywood actors, so many Oscar winners. And she has her 12 steps approach. And step number one is step number two. Number one is, what is your character's overall objective? And what is their scene objective? Because if you look at a movie, what is it that that person wants? Is it to be loved? Is it to be accepted? Is it to be validated? Is it to be worshipped? You look at these different characters to you pick any movie, any character, Harry Potter, what was his real thing? What was motivated him? To protect the people he loved. That was his overarching goal in the whole series. And because of that, because he couldn't protect his parents, they were gone. And so everyone else that came into his life, his overarching goal was to protect them, to protect the people he loved. And it wasn't fame, it wasn't validation. And some people, that is their overarching goal, and that's okay. But for him, it was to protect the people he loved. And in every scene that you go into, you have to have a smaller goal that builds toward that larger goal. And so it was like, as an actor, Are you remembering, I'm eating lunch right now. How can I think about eating the lunch in this scene is protecting the people I love? Well, there has to be something in this scene that can work me towards that overarching goal. And if you can look at that, whether it be, I took a nap today, woke up really early. It was in graduate school. I'm doing school remotely, 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. class. It was 11 in the morning hit, and I was just like, I was trying to get more work done, and I was like, I hit a wall, the thing that was my smaller objective and goal at that moment was literally to take a nap, and I laid down, and it was like, it was in that moment, it was the thing that I could do that could help me reach my larger goals. Because if I wanted to edit, I wanted to get a podcast edited today, but there was no way that I was going to be able to achieve that if I was tired. So I went, laid down, woke up, refreshed, finished a podcast, got it up. And it was right there, because, if Ivana helped me see how to break those things down. So it was, you're speaking to the choir about these overarching goals, but talk to me about how do you work with these smaller goals? How do people in project management or in life figure out what those are or how they're relevant?
So I will tell you the secret of how I get everything done. That's everything in quotes for people who cannot actually see us. First, there is no everything.
Right?
There's only one thing. You always have to choose which is the one thing I will do right now. Sometimes, like you, it's a nap.
Yes.
and because if you can't think, you can't actually do anything. So I write every day. I take my walks every day. I do my various exercises every day. And I have systems because I really love my systems. So I organize my day with blocks of time for doing various things. And because I only work on one thing at a time, I can finish enough of it to leave it clean. So, for example, I'm not going to write an entire book in one day. I can sometimes write a short story in one day. I can often write a blog post or two in one day, right?
Yeah.
But even those, I don't always finish in one day.
Yeah.
The key is to finish enough to leave it clean, so you don't have any dangling bits in your head that irritate you as you're going through the rest of your day. We do not multitask. Humans do not multitask. We are not capable of it. So we can work on one thing, get it to a clean place, even if it's not, quote, fully done. And then we go on and do the next thing. Because we all have obligations to all kinds of people, right? I have obligations to my clients, to myself, to all kinds of people across the world, right? So I need to work on, quote, all of them, but I can only do one thing at a time. So the only secret I know is work on one thing at a time, get it, either finish it or get it to a place where I know what to do the next time I come around to this.
I love that. This, and you're again, you're preaching to the choir. Like my daughter, I've been noticing, and there's this thing I keep telling her, and it's something that I'm really working with her on, switching. Okay. If you are on this task and you want to move to that task, we need to finish this and slide over here. You're not going to be playing video games and eating. Like, I have no problem with you playing a video game, but when you're eating, you be present with your food. You enjoy your food. You sit there with your food. If you want to watch a YouTube video, then watch that YouTube video. Be present with it. Be there with it, And again, I'm very careful about what she watches, because there's some of this stuff that makes her really, it's just like all over. And whatever it is that we're doing, it is now time to switch into this next task. And it gives her the ability to kind of figure things out. And was something that I had to learn because, like you said, but we live in a world where everyone thinks they can multitask. I drive to work in the morning, and here in Vietnam, I'll see 20 guys trying to text message while riding a motorcycle, which is how, I don't know how they even think they can do it, but like they're doing it, and it's not done well. And I saw a guy miss a truck by this far, and he was so into his phone that he didn't even see that he almost got hit by a truck. And it was just like, this distracted world, um, it's not a good thing. Coming back to this, like, how do you recommend breaking down large goals into manageable tasks, though? Because that was something that I also wanted to ask you, because again, we see these things that are big, and we need to do these baby steps, but how do you go about breaking it down? What is the segmentation that you do, or is there some magic sauce, or do you just do what you can get done that day and then say what's next?
So I really like to think about what could be of value for the eventual user. Right.
Mm,
If we think in terms of value, we might take a different approach to thinking about tasks. So I'm
yeah,
I'm going to use the example of software product development. Um,
love it.
you're not a software person, and that's totally fine. But you know that you interact with the user interface,
Yeah,
and I bet you have worked tried to work with products where the user interface promised you something that would be useful. And then
yeah,
you tried to hit a button and it didn't work. It went nowhere. That's a case of people doing tasks instead of offering value. In
yes,
software, that's called working across the architecture, where you do the user interface, and maybe there are people who work in the middle, and then there are people who work in the platform. That's not value; those are just tasks. And the way, as an example, if I use this for my writing, I don't happen to spend I really dislike outlines for writing because they shortcut my thinking and learning as I write. So I'm
mm,
always learning as I write. That's how writers write. You do it as acting by learning about the goals of the character. The,
yeah,
the longer you inhabit that character, the more you understand the goals. And it's the same way for writing. The longer I write about something, the more I understand what I'm actually thinking. So I might, I no, I don't write outlines. I often write a user journey for my nonfiction books, but that's only
mm,
because I want to know what are the problems I want to solve in this chapter, and then how do I organize the chapters? And I always change that, so it's fine. But that means I will write. Excuse me. I will write about a problem, and then how to solve it. That offers my reader value. I might publish it as a blog post. I might publish it later as part of the entire book. But when I
mm,
start with problems and I say, what's the first thing I could do to offer value, right? Either to me as the person who is existing in my unorganized office, or
mm,
or me as the person who really wants a clean sink and does not want dirty dishes, right? How do I offer value to either my future self or my current self or my eventual readers or the users of this product? So that's why I'm not very big on tasks in terms of a task, right? So
mhm,
I have a perennially messy office. I could have a task that says clean up the office. That
mm,
I have not succeeded in that task for 30
mm,
years. I have never succeeded in that. However, I have succeeded in throw out two pieces of paper,
yeah,
right? Find two pieces of paper I can throw at, or file three things, or organize this chunk of space so I can go back to it again when I have time. That has allowed me to clean up my office. The whole big thing of clean up my office, that doesn't work for me. But I can say, offer my future self a little piece of value by filing this thing, or throwing out 2 pieces of paper, or something like that.
Yeah. I love when I was younger. I don't play so much now, but my daughter loves video games and mainly Minecraft. But when I was younger, there were some fun games that came out. Not young, but when I was in college, we played this game called Warcraft. One of the things that it was like an MMORPG. It was like big world, and you went on these missions. You got to play these goals, and there was these things that you could do. Go out, and one of the things that was interesting is as you were completing these missions, there were little checklists that find find the orc with the blue hat. I found the orc with the blue hat. Go visit the Fountain of Enchantment. Visit the Fountain of Enchantment. And I wish that there was a fountain of enchantment in my everyday life. Sadly, I don't see too many of them. Haven't
No.
seen any lately, though. There are amazingly cool things around me. I found this beautiful pagoda right near my house with 1,000 different Buddhas on the wall. It was beautiful, and it was hidden down this alleyway, kind of like a fountain of enchantment. But the tomorrow, 6 a.m. Got to wake up. I have to get my daughter's clothes ironed. My wife's traveling, so it's all on me right now. After I get my daughter's clothes ironed, I got to make sure she's up, get her out the door. We're going to drive to her school. On the way to school, we got to stop and pick up some bread. And then I got to pick up my laundry, and I got to put my laundry away. And for me, when I try to break them down into those little like gamified mission points, and I was playing around with like even giving myself, like gamifying it, giving myself a score. All right, remember, I got my daughter off to school. That's 10 points. Woohoo! And it made it fun for me, and it was easier to kind of frame things that way, because again, when I get into this analysis paralysis, when I get a big list, I have all these lists of things that I need to do, and I'll get like it's kind of like my pool. But then I'll do my daily scrum. Like, what is the thing that I can get done today? Let's go through these things. And every morning I'll put down my list of what can I actually try to get done. And it might be like doing the dishes. It doesn't have to be all of these giant things. But like, if I don't have that, I just sit there and go, what should I be doing next? And I get overloaded. And so it's tricky. But one of the things that you mentioned that got me thinking is that you were talking about sometimes there's changes that come up. How do you handle unexpected changes when working toward a goal?
So this is where personal Kanban, which is what you sort of described, and your lists really matter. So I always have tons of goals for my consulting business,
Right.
my writing, all of that, right? Let's just assume that. And I really love it when a potential client calls and says, we're thinking of working with you to solve this problem. Can we talk? Right? Can we
Mhm.
chat? That's a great interruption. But it also
Yeah.
means I'm not going to do the work I thought I was going to do. It does not
Yeah.
matter what's on my personal Kanban. It does not matter what's on my today list. It's not going to happen, right? I need to interrupt all of that when a potential client wants to talk, because they have problems now, right?
Yes.
They're not going to want to wait 2 weeks until I'm quote available. And I don't
No.
want them to wait 2 weeks. I want to
No.
talk to them now. So I think that what happens for us as solo entrepreneurs is that we are accustomed to change all the time. And that I
Yeah.
think our clients fool themselves into thinking that change does not happen all that often. And one of the things I do is say, okay, I can throw out today's plan. Did I do the one most important thing? And
Yes.
maybe that one most important thing was making space in my schedule to talk to these people. That might
Yeah.
be it, right? And that was not what I had anticipated when I woke up in the morning. However, that might turn out to be the most important thing to do today. And the way I manage this is to first avoid filling up my entire day. I don't fill
I
up
like
my
that.
entire day with everything I need to do. That's why I think of my to-do list or my Kanban board as full of options. That's why I
Oh,
work on one thing at a time. Now I can pull from all those options.
I love that. That is something I have to apply to my daily life because this is what I need to get done. And then there's this feeling of guilt that comes in when I don't. And like not guilt, but it is a degree of that. Like, oh man, I should have gotten more done. But which comes in to the next question that I was looking at. Like, how do you measure progress and when to pivot, when to step away from something?
So I think pivoting is really hard. And one
Right.
thing I need to let me talk about the sunk cost fallacy. Right.
Okay.
The sunk cost fallacy says I invested all this time and all this money in doing this thing. I quote should use that time and money that I invested already in that thing instead of pivoting to the next thing. I see this in people who have gotten law degrees. Right.
Yeah.
It turns out a law degree is the most common. How can I? There's a way to say this, and I don't remember. But most of the people with law degrees never practice law.
Yeah.
Never, ever, ever. They don't do anything with law because they realize when it comes time to either get a job in law that they are either not, they don't want the options they see, or
Hmm.
they realize they don't really want to practice law. But
Yeah.
they got this degree. They spent 3 years of their time right in law school. They did all this stuff.
Yes.
We need to treat our previous investments as gifts to ourselves.
I
We
love
spent
that.
all this time, we spent all this time, we learned something, and we realized this is not going to happen. We have we have beaten ourselves against the wall, we have beaten ourselves up. We are not going to make this happen. Instead, how can we take this thing where we invested this time and information and use it to go forward? That so a really trivial example is I for a long time I had get a new ISP and migrate my WordPress site from this old host to this new host. I had tons of trouble with my old host. It was really a problem, all that other stuff. And I never could quite find the time to make it move. And I finally realized I was having all this trouble. Why did
Yeah.
not why did I not ask for help? Why did I
Yes.
not hire somebody to do this for
Right.
me? Right? Because they actually have the expertise to know how to move one site to another host. Now, it should be easy. Yeah, I've had my site since 2003 and went through many, many. I didn't even start off with WordPress, right? So I have had oh, I actually had, I've actually had a site since the late 90s and only
Wow.
migrated to WordPress in 2006 or something. So I have years and years of content. Nothing about this was going to be easy. Why did I
Yeah.
think I could do it and still maintain my consulting business? Right? You can. Very few of us can add more without taking something away.
Right.
So, so this pivoting business is really understanding: am I stuck in the sunk cost fallacy? And if I am, how do I take all this previous knowledge and expertise and time and money and offer that as a gift to myself and then choose another path.
And this is becoming even more relevant now because of the rise of AI. Jobs are becoming redundant there, and it is just beginning. There are going to be entire fields, entire professions that are going to be replaced. People that, and I'm starting to see it across the board. I mean, now I did video editing and video producing for a long time, but I think in 5-10 years, you're just going to upload the video and the AI will get you a finished product. And like, that's one whole group of people. What other jobs are going to be looking, but a lot of people feel overwhelmed or scared. What should I be going into? What career should I, but maybe it's time to pivot. Maybe one of the people that I really respect is my father. I love my dad, and my dad had to go through a big pivot. He was working in marketing and administration at universities, and he was the director of enrollment at this one school. And then he moved up, and he was a high, somewhat other, it wasn't vice president or something close to that, one of the managers at the school. And then he left, and he had some health challenges, but when he tried to come back, it just, time had caught up with him, and people were passing him by for everything, finding younger, cheaper candidates. And instead of any type of pity party, he just said, well, he went to massage school, became a massage therapist. And after he became a massage therapist, he was beyond happy. And then he loved what he was doing. He'd been in education for so long that he got into teaching people. He became part of a school, and he became one of the core teachers at this massage school. And there was a time where I said, well, don't you feel bad about all of the time you invested before in your old career? And he's like, not really, because it was just time to move to a new thing. And there wasn't this looking back, or he just embraced it. And I always respected that about him. I didn't understand it. But now, as I've gotten older myself, and I'm looking at what is going to happen in the next 10, 15, 20 years, is my career going to be one of those that is going to be, phased out? I think it's going to be something that more people have to start looking at. Like, how can you pivot? How can you sit there and go, when is enough enough? And look with enthusiasm, and like you said, viewing what happened in your past as a gift, viewing it as this beautiful thing that you got to experience, and now on to something new.
Well, so I really like the idea of tools helping us do our jobs better. And there's a
Yes,
lot about AI that could help us do our jobs better.
I love it.
Right now,
Yeah,
AI writing is regression to a very poor mean, right?
yeah,
So, but it's not going to be that way forever. For
no,
example, I use AI audio for a bunch of my audiobooks. Why?
right,
Because I write nonfiction, and well, primarily nonfiction. And and most people listen to nonfiction the way I listen to podcasts, which is at 2x. Right?
yep,
There's you don't
yes,
you don't need a human, so
yeah,
people can listen at 2x. You just don't. And audiobooks are AI narrated audio is actually a great way to use
yeah,
AI. Now, will there still be a call for human narrated audio? Absolutely. But
yes,
I bet we can I bet AI narrated audiobooks would make it possible for audiobooks to really break past that 8 to 10% of all sales and get more
yes,
people interested in reading. I don't
right,
actually care how people read. I am agnostic on how they read because a
right,
bunch of people have dyslexia. That makes it very difficult for them to actually read letters on a page. Why not allow them to
yes,
listen to books, right? I just want people to consume my content. I don't care how,
Exactly.
right? So,
Exactly.
and anything that requires person to person interaction will still require a human. It's
Yeah.
this impersonal interaction that we really have to be careful of. And for me, the jury is out on AI coding. I am
Right.
sure that AI software development is currently iffy at best and bad at worst.
There's I teach still. I teach children English, and one of the things that I've used AI helps me with worksheets. AI helps me create things that are better tools that I can then go and teach my students in a better way. That I think that it is a tool, like you said, that we will be able to harness. But I think it is also a paradigm shift. Can you imagine talking to someone in the age of horses and trying to describe, the coming future of cars, and to say, all right, eventually there's going to be this thing called a car wash. You kind of drive through it. There's no ability to conceptualize where we're going for so many people. And I think that, the problems that will arise, there will be solutions that are found, and they're probably things that we can't even think about right now. But one other question: how this is something that is very personal to me. I deal with, I'll be going strong, and there are times where I feel motivated, I feel on the ball, but then there are times where I lose my motivation, I lose my drive. How do you help these teams that you work with, or just recommend for people to stay motivated even during challenging times, even when you are that person who has fallen to the bottom of the crevasse and you are just trying to get to the next thing? Because it would be nice if everything was always sunshine and roses, but it's not always.
No. So that's when I actually ask teams to focus on a short term goal. What do we
Nice.
need to do now? And how can we collaborate to do it so we are all working together on one thing at a time? Right? So the mountain climber had a short term goal, not of walking again, not of
Yeah.
climbing again, just getting to the point where he could be rescued. Right? He had to stay alive long enough. And
Yes.
and for teams and organizations, especially when their senior management is unwise and
It's
and
very
they
diplomatically put.
yeah and they don't see how the organization is going to make any money. This is where teams need a short term goal that where they can show value at the end every time they finish something.
I love
Right.
that.
So work on one thing at a time, collaborate to finish it, and then release that. Then go on to the next thing. And that allows the team to coalesce together. Maybe not in support of the entire organization, because if the entire organization is unwise, we will just leave it there. Then don't try and fix everything. Nobody can fix everything. Instead, focus on what you can fix and work with other people so that you get the camaraderie of working together and the collegiality, and that will bring everybody up.
I love that. Well, how do people balance those short and long term goals? How do you sit there and go, okay, right now is a short term time. When do you think about the long term? When do you think about the short term?
So I often discovered that if I focus on the short term and something of value, often for somebody else, then the long term will work itself out.
I love that.
Especially if I'm in the middle of pivoting something, right?
Yeah.
I am after I finish this nonfiction book. I'm writing a book called Effective Public Speaking, and I don't yet know the
Ooh,
subtitle. Right, so that will be that's the book I'm working on now. And after that is a product oriented book, a product leadership book but I don't know if it's 2 books or even 3 books at this point. I have I have too many ideas, and often too many ideas means I have several books. So I
Mm,
don't know if that will be a triad or a duet or whatever it is. I'm not worried about that. I will, once I finish this book, I will then start to figure out that book. And
I love
I
that.
I am sure that in the pivoting of the writing, I know a bunch of stuff at the beginning and a bunch of stuff at the end. It's all the stuff in the middle I don't know about. I will figure that out as I write it. So in the doing of even short-term goals, as long as they have value to someone, we will figure out the longer term thinking.
I love that. So essentially focus on what, like for right now, I'm in this podcast. I would love to be a large, famous podcaster and having, just that being millions of people listening to every single download. That's my dream. But right now, like that would be daunting. So what I think about is getting this episode out. Tomorrow, I'll download everything. That's my next step. After I download it, I'll get all the footage organized, throw it into the editing software. After I throw it into the editing software, I work and create my titles. And if I continue to focus on those little short-term things, eventually I have a product done. And when I can release that product, which is of value, it it gives me something to put out in the world that is valuable to my customers, which are the listeners.
Hmm.
So it's beautiful like that. What if I could ask you one more question, one last question, I promise. If you could go back in time and give one bit of advice to your younger self, what would that advice be?
Well, I have I have to do 2 pieces of advice.
I
One
like that.
is wear sunscreen.
Right.
Um, I had skin cancer last year, and just on my nose, and it was more of a pain in the tush than anything else. And it was I grew up at a time that we did not know about sunscreen, so wear
Yeah,
your sunscreen. But I think that for a more realistic piece of advice, I would say, how do you concentrate on always going forward?
I
How do
love
you
that.
make it so you can do one thing and take another small step and do that thing? I don't have any regrets, I think, at this point. Every so often, I turn to my husband and say, did we do a good job as parents? And he says to me, well, our kids don't hate us. So
I love that.
we must have done something right. But I don't really regret anything. I think it's really important that we figure out how to take what we have learned and use it to go forward.
I love that. I love that. It there was a this thing that I remember when I was a kid. I was in a haunted house, absolutely terrified out of my mind. And the only thing I told myself was keep going forward. Keep going forward. And that was, it seemed silly at the time, but it wasn't silly years later when I had a viral heart infection. And when I was getting all of these tests done and the road to recovery seemed daunting and I was really unsure about what to do. And I remember my dad gave me a book that I can't remember what everything that's in the book, but the overall message of the book was sometimes we just have enough light for the next step. We're walking in the darkness, and when you have a flashlight doesn't illuminate the whole way. The flashlight illuminates your next step. And if you can continue shining that flashlight into your future, whatever that might be, or your path, you'll be able to figure it out. And it's like all of those little like pictures where it's like success is not always like this. Sometimes success looks like this. Sometimes success looks like this. And sometimes
Oh
success
yeah,
is just staying afloat, you know?
yeah, yeah. Oh, people think they have linear careers where they start off as a junior or something, and then go up and up and up until they're a CEO or nonsense, some nonsense like that. No, people's careers go back and forth and sideways and up and down. They circle
Yes.
around. I mean, no, nothing is linear in life, and
Yeah.
I think we do ourselves a real disservice when we say this is linear. No, it's not.